Hi, and welcome back to the English Talk community. I'm Julia, and today, I want to talk to you about something that can completely transform the way you learn English, not in a dramatic, complicated way, but in small, easy steps that actually work. So, let me ask you this. Do you have an English moment every day? Just one. Not an hour. Not even 30 minutes, just a small window where you connect with the language in a way that feels natural and simple. Now, imagine this. What if just 15 minutes a day could change the way you speak English forever? I'm serious. You don't need to move to another country, you don't need to take expensive courses, and you don't need to memorize long vocabulary lists. You just need to build a daily routine, something that becomes as automatic as brushing your teeth. Because here's the truth: fluency is built one small action at a time, not through perfection, not through pressure, through consistency. I know that word routine can feel a little boring or even heavy, but I want you to think of it differently. A daily English routine isn't a chore. It's a gift you give to yourself. A few minutes of your day that are just for you, your growth, your voice, and your confidence. It's not about being perfect. It's about showing up again and again until it becomes who you are. And that's exactly what we're going to explore in today's episode. I want to help you create a routine that works for you, one that fits into your real life, no matter where you are, how busy you feel, or what your current level is. Whether you're just starting or you've been learning English for years, this can be a turning point for your journey. Maybe you've tried before. Maybe you've started with energy and then stopped. That's okay. That happens to everyone. The problem isn't you. The problem is that most routines people try are too big, too complicated, or not connected to real life. They're not sustainable. They don't make you feel good. But what if your routine could feel simple, flexible, and even enjoyable? Let's begin by imagining something. Picture yourself 1 month from now. You've spent just 10 or 15 minutes a day practicing English, not studying in the traditional sense, just listening to something, repeating a phrase out loud, writing a quick sentence, or speaking to yourself in the mirror. That's it. And now, 4 weeks later, you feel more confident, you understand more, and your words come out a little smoother. It didn't require hours. It just required you showing up for yourself, one small step at a time. Sometimes people ask me, Julia, can I really improve if I only spend a few minutes a day? And my answer is always, yes, if you do it every day. You see, the key isn't the number of minutes. The key is the number of repetitions. The more you interact with English daily, even for a short time, the more your brain starts to treat it like a familiar language. Like a friend. I want you to feel encouraged today. I want you to know that you're capable. And I want you to know that you don't have to do this alone. That's what this podcast is here for. To be your guide, your space, your motivation. You're already doing something amazing by being here. You're listening in English. You're practicing right now. That means you're already on the right path, and if you're new here, welcome. This is a space where we talk about real challenges, real progress, and real people learning English in the middle of busy, beautiful, and sometimes messy lives. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to keep going. If this sounds like the kind of support you need, I'd love to invite you to subscribe to this podcast and leave a like or review. When you do that, you're helping us reach more people who are just like you, people who are trying to improve their English with honesty, courage, and hope. Your action makes a difference. So, take a moment now, hit that follow button, tap the like, share this with a friend who's also learning, or just take a deep breath and remind yourself, you're doing enough, and you're doing great. Now, let me bring this closer to your daily life. What does your day look like right now? Do you wake up and scroll through your phone? Do you have a morning walk, or maybe a quiet moment before work? What if you could use just part of that time to Connect with English? Maybe listening to this podcast while making coffee. Maybe repeating one phrase in English as you stretch. That's your English moment. That's how it starts. You don't need perfect grammar or long words. You don't need to impress anyone. You just need to practice. In your own way, with your own rhythm. Because every moment you give to English becomes a seed. And those seeds grow. Some people like to call it a ritual instead of a routine. Something personal. Something that makes them feel calm or focused. I love that idea. Your daily English ritual can be 5 minutes of repeating phrases while you wash the dishes, or watching a video and writing down 2 expressions you liked, or recording your voice answering a question in English and listening back. It doesn't have to be hard. It just has to be consistent. Remember, it's not about doing more. It's about doing what you can, and doing it with presence. Your brain doesn't need hours of information. It needs repetition, rhythm, and emotional connection. That's what routines provide. That's how we remember. That's how we grow. And maybe, just maybe, this is the episode that helps you begin. Maybe this is the moment you say, yes, I'm ready to do something small every day. If that's you, I'm cheering for you. Every single day matters. Every small choice builds the future you want. Let's build this together. Let's make English part of your daily life gently, consistently, and in a way that supports you exactly where you are. Your routine starts now. Let's talk about something I wish more English learners understood from the beginning: why routines actually work, and why so many people give up before they start seeing results. I've worked with learners from all over the world, and there's one pattern I see again and again. People begin with excitement, full of motivation and good intentions. They decide they're going to study hard, maybe 2 hours on Saturday, maybe every evening after work, and they build these big goals. But after a few days, life gets in the way. They miss a day, then another, and before they know it, the whole plan falls apart. And they feel guilty. They think they failed, but the truth is they didn't fail. The plan failed them, because that plan was never realistic in the first place. Not for a real person with a job, a family, responsibilities, stress, or just a regular, messy day. You don't need more pressure. You need clarity. You need something that fits into your life, not something that demands you change your life just to study. Our brains are not designed for big, intense efforts once in a while. Our brains learn best through repetition and gentle exposure. That's how habits form. That's how language becomes familiar. Think about it. How did you learn your first language? You didn't study it for hours. You heard it a little every day. You repeated it. You made mistakes. You heard it again. Slowly, your brain created connections. That same process still works. You just have to trust it. The reason routines work is because they remove the need for motivation. When something becomes a habit, you don't have to decide every day if you're going to do it. You just do it. The way you brush your teeth or check your phone in the morning. It becomes automatic. And when English is automatic, even in a small way, you start making progress without realizing it. People often tell me, "But Julia, I don't have time." I understand that. Time is limited, but it's not about how much time you have. It's about how you use the time that's already there. 10 minutes a day is not a lot. It's the time you spend waiting in line, scrolling through social media, or sitting on the train. If you take just one of those moments and turn it into your English time, your routine is already starting. Here's what many learners get wrong. They think that more time means more progress. But the real progress comes from frequency, not duration. 2 hours once a week might feel productive, but it's not giving your brain the constant contact it needs. On the other hand, 10 minutes a day, every day, creates a rhythm. That rhythm tells your brain, this language is part of my life now. And that's when learning becomes natural. Let me give you an example. I once worked with a student named Patrick, a civil engineer from Dublin. He had tried for years to improve his English, always signing up for weekend courses or watching long grammar lessons online. But he told me he never remembered much. He was always starting over. We changed one thing. We made a tiny daily plan. Every morning, before work, he listened to a short audio in English while making coffee. That was it. No notebooks. No pressure. Just 10 minutes. After a few weeks, his listening improved. He felt more confident in meetings. He wasn't overwhelmed because he had created something sustainable. What I want you to hear is this. Routines work not because they're perfect, but because they're consistent. And consistency builds confidence. The more you show up, the more you believe in your ability to keep going. And that belief, that quiet confidence, is what carries you forward on the days when you feel tired or distracted or unsure. Another reason routines are so powerful is because they lower resistance. When you don't have to make a big decision like, should I study English today? You're more likely to follow through. Your mind already knows what to do. It's the same time, the same place, the same simple action. And your brain starts to connect that moment with progress. That's why I often recommend linking English to an existing habit. For example, if you drink tea every evening, that's your English moment. If you check emails in the morning, listen to English audio first. You're not creating a new space in your life, you're gently adding something to what's already there. I also want to speak to the perfectionists out there. Maybe you feel that if you can't do something properly, it's not worth doing. Maybe you think, 10 minutes isn't enough, so why even bother? I understand that. But that mindset is what keeps people stuck. You don't need to be perfect. You need to begin. 10 minutes is enough. 5 minutes is enough. 1 sentence a day is enough. Progress is built on movement, not perfection. The most successful learners I've seen are not the ones who study the most. They're the ones who stay consistent. The ones who forgive themselves when they miss a day and come back the next day. The ones who celebrate small steps instead of waiting for a big achievement. They keep it simple. They keep it light. And because of that, they keep going. Think of your brain like a garden. If you water it once a week with a big bucket, some plants might survive. But if you give it a little water every day, the roots grow stronger. That's what routines do. They build strong foundations. Quietly, gently, effectively. So if you've tried before and stopped, you didn't fail. You just didn't have the right routine. Maybe it was too heavy, too ambitious, too disconnected from your life. That's okay. You can begin again, with less pressure and more wisdom. You can choose something small and meaningful. You can build a daily English habit that feels natural instead of forced. And when you do that, something amazing happens. English stops feeling like something outside of you, something you have to chase or fight with. It becomes part of your daily rhythm. It moves with you. It grows with you. And eventually, it becomes your voice. Let me tell you a story about someone I think many of you will relate to. Her name is Helena. She's a graphic designer living in Berlin, and like many professionals in big cities, her days are packed. Meetings, client calls, emails, deadlines, it all moves fast. Helena always wanted to improve her English, especially because many of her clients were international and a lot of communication happened in English. She wasn't a beginner, but she never felt truly confident speaking or understanding fast conversations. For years, she followed the same routine. Every Sunday, she would set aside a block of time, usually 2 hours in the afternoon, to study English. She'd go through lessons, read articles, sometimes watch videos, and take notes. It felt productive in the moment, and she told herself that she was making progress. But during the week, English disappeared from her life. Her focus would return to work, and she wouldn't interact with the language again until the next Sunday. After a few months, Helena noticed something frustrating. Every Sunday, she felt like she was starting over. Words she had just studied the previous week felt unfamiliar. Grammar rules that made sense a week ago suddenly seemed confusing again. Her listening hadn't improved much, and when she had to speak in a meeting, her mind would freeze. She began to feel stuck, and even though she was putting in effort, the results weren't showing up. When we first talked, Helena told me something that stayed with me. She said, "I don't understand why I keep forgetting everything. I try so hard once a week, but it's like nothing sticks." I remember nodding and saying, "Because your brain isn't hearing English often enough to keep it active. It's like trying to water a plant once a week with a bucket and then leaving it dry the rest of the time." That image clicked for her. She realized that the problem wasn't her intelligence, her memory, or her commitment. The problem was the gap between study sessions. Her brain wasn't getting regular contact with English, so it couldn't build the neural pathways needed for fluency. It was like she was restarting the engine every time without letting it warm up. So we tried something different. I asked her to stop the Sunday study sessions completely. Yes, completely, and instead commit to just 10 minutes of English a day, every day. At first, she was surprised. "That's it, 10 minutes?" I told her yes, but with one condition: it had to be consistent, and it had to be part of her real life. Something she could actually stick with, no matter how busy the day was. We talked about her mornings. She told me she had a quiet moment while drinking her first cup of coffee before starting work. That's when she felt most calm and focused. I suggested she make that moment her English time. Nothing complicated, just listening to a short podcast episode, something around 5 to 10 minutes. No pausing, no rewinding, no notes. Just listening, like she'd listen to music or a friend talking. She agreed to try it for 1 week. Every morning, cup of coffee in hand, she listened to a short podcast in English, sometimes business related, sometimes conversational, sometimes something fun. And she kept going. 1 week turned into 2, then 3. By the end of the first month, she didn't feel like she was doing something extra anymore. It became part of her day, just like brushing her teeth. The results were quiet at first, but then something shifted. During a team meeting, she noticed that she was catching phrases more easily. She didn't have to translate everything in her head. She even answered a few questions in English without overthinking. She came back to me and said, "I didn't realize how much I was improving until I heard myself speaking." That's the power of small, daily exposure. Her vocabulary started to expand naturally because she was hearing the same words and phrases in context. Her listening improved because she wasn't overloading her brain. And most importantly, her confidence grew, not because she suddenly became fluent overnight, but because she created a simple, reliable habit that made English feel like a normal part of her day. I often say this to my listeners: fluency is not a goal you reach by sprinting. It's a path you walk, step by step. Helena's story is proof of that. She didn't need a dramatic change. She didn't need to study harder. She just needed to be in contact with English every day, even for a short time. That consistency gave her more than any long Sunday session ever could. What I love about Helena's routine is that it wasn't forced. It matched her energy and her schedule. And because of that, she kept going. That's what I want you to think about right now. Not what you should do, but what would be easy for you to do consistently. What part of your day already exists where English could gently fit in? Your walk to work? Your lunch break? Right before bed? We often think that learning has to be serious, formal, or structured. But Helena's experience shows us that real learning happens when we relax, when we let the language flow into our life, when we trust the process and stop trying to control every step. She let go of the pressure to be perfect and chose to simply show up every day. And in doing so, her English started to reflect that calm consistency. Her story isn't unique because she did something special. It's powerful because she did something simple. And that simple choice made all the difference. There's something special about the morning. It's a time of quiet, of clarity, before the world starts asking for your attention. It's when your mind is fresh, your energy hasn't been pulled in 10 different directions yet, and you have a chance to choose how your day begins. And that's why morning English moments can be one of the most powerful tools in your language routine. They don't have to be big or complicated. But when you start your day with English, even for just a few minutes, you're sending a clear message to your brain. This matters. I've seen it work again and again. People who start their day with a small, intentional English practice often find it easier to stay connected to the language throughout the day. It's not just about improving your vocabulary or grammar, it's about building a habit that anchors your mindset. Think of it like stretching your brain. Just 5 minutes in the morning can warm up your thoughts in English and make it easier to speak, listen, or think in the language later. Let me walk you through a few simple things you can do. No stress, no pressure, just ideas to try and make your own. One of the easiest and most effective habits is listening. You can listen to a short podcast, a dialogue, or even a video in English while you're still in bed. Before the emails, before the news, before the to-do list begins. Just close your eyes and listen. Let the words enter your mind without analyzing them. The goal is not to understand every word. The goal is to let English be the first voice you hear that day. If you want something a little more active, you can repeat one sentence out loud. Choose a phrase that you like, or one you heard in a show or a podcast. Maybe something like "Today is a good day to speak English," or "I feel more confident every time I try." Say it slowly. Say it clearly. Say it again. Your voice becomes your teacher. When you speak out loud in the morning, your pronunciation improves naturally because you're not in a rush. You're focused. And that focus builds muscle memory in your mouth, in your brain, and in your confidence. Some of my listeners love writing. If that's you, try writing just one sentence in a notebook every morning. It can be about how you feel, what your plan is, something you're grateful for, or something completely random. The key is to write in English without worrying too much about correctness. You're not writing for a test. You're writing to activate your brain. Even a simple line like "I want to practice speaking with someone this week" can make a big difference. Writing in the morning sets the tone. It gives your brain a direction. I once worked with a listener from Amsterdam named Emily. She had a very busy job and 2 small children. Her days were completely full. But she told me that the only moment she had for herself was the 5 minutes between waking up and helping her kids get ready. So we created a 5-minute morning routine. She chose a phrase the night before, set it as her phone wallpaper, and when she woke up, she would read it out loud 3 times. That was it. Over time, those 5 minutes became her English anchor. She told me she began to feel more natural with the language just from those little daily moments. There's also something psychological that happens when you start your day with English. It becomes part of your identity. You begin to see yourself, not just as someone who is learning English, but as someone who lives in English, even in a small way. That shift can be powerful. You're not waiting for the right time anymore, you're making the time. Right from the beginning of your day. The morning also helps eliminate excuses. Let's be honest, when we leave something for the end of the day, we often don't do it. We get tired, we're busy, we forget. But in the morning, before the distractions begin, you have a clean space. A chance to create a habit that feels light, manageable, and honest. You're not trying to become fluent overnight. You're simply adding one drop of English to your morning rhythm. Some people like to combine English with something physical, like stretching or a short walk. Imagine doing a few yoga poses, or walking around your room while repeating a phrase in English. Movement helps memory. When your body moves while you speak, your brain creates stronger connections. You're turning language into experience. Another idea is to use prompts. You can prepare a list of morning questions in English and choose one each day to answer out loud or in writing. Questions like, what do I want to achieve today? What is something I'm proud of? Or what English word do I want to use more? These questions aren't just about language. They help you reflect, build vocabulary, and create meaningful connections to the words you use. I often remind people that starting small is not a weakness. It's a strength. Anyone can promise to study English for an hour, but the person who spends 5 minutes every single morning, that's the person who actually changes. Because routines create results. And when your routine begins first thing in the morning, everything else becomes easier. Even if you don't feel motivated, even if you're tired, just press play on a podcast, whisper a sentence, or write a quick line in your notes app. That action, that tiny decision, builds momentum. And momentum is what moves you forward. I remember someone from Copenhagen, a listener named Jacob, who told me he started his morning routine by simply listening to one sentence in English while brushing his teeth. One sentence. He didn't even say it out loud at first, but over time, he started to repeat it. Then he started to add more. And one day, he realized he was talking to himself in English while making breakfast, describing what he was doing, asking himself questions. It all started from one simple, quiet habit. Your morning moment doesn't need to look like anyone else's. It just needs to belong to you. It can be one sentence, one idea, one voice in English. You don't need silence, a perfect environment, or a special notebook. You just need the willingness to start. Even if the start is only 30 seconds long, English in the morning isn't just practice, it's a mindset. It reminds you that learning is part of who you are, that your goals matter, that your voice deserves time. You don't have to wait until everything is perfect. You don't have to wait until you feel ready. You can begin each day with one small English action. And that single action can carry you further than you expect. Let me introduce you to Marco. He's a project manager living in Milan, and like many professionals working in fast-paced environments, his days are full before they even begin. Early meetings, long phone calls, client deadlines, endless coordination. He's constantly in motion. Marco always wanted to feel more confident speaking English because many of his clients were based in other countries. He didn't have major issues with vocabulary, and his grammar was decent, but something was missing: fluency and comfort. He told me that when he had to speak English during work calls, he often froze or hesitated, afraid he wouldn't find the right words in time. When we first connected, he explained that he had tried different ways to improve. He downloaded apps, signed up for courses, even tried watching entire TV shows in English at night. But the truth is, by the end of the day, he was too tired to focus. His brain was exhausted. Every time he sat down to study, he felt like he was forcing himself. And slowly, that pressure made him stop. Not because he didn't care, but because his routine didn't fit into his life. One day, during our conversation, I asked a simple question. Is there any part of your day that feels quiet, even for just a few minutes? He thought for a moment and then laughed. Well, when I brush my teeth, that's probably the only time I'm alone and not answering emails. It was a joke at first, but I could see the opportunity. That's when I suggested something small. What if you used that time, just those 2 or 3 minutes, to watch a short video in English? Marco was skeptical at first. He said, "But that's such a short time. Can that really help?" And I told him the same thing I tell many of you. It's not about how long you practice, it's about how often. When your brain touches English, Every single day, even briefly, it starts to treat it as something familiar, something natural, something that belongs in your daily life, not just in the classroom or on special occasions. So, he gave it a try. He picked a playlist of short English videos, some about technology, some about culture, some simple everyday conversations, and he made a rule for himself. Every morning, while brushing his teeth, he would play one video. He didn't need to understand every word. He didn't need to take notes. He didn't even need to stop brushing. He just needed to show up for that moment. At first, it felt strange, but within a few days, it became automatic. He'd reach for his phone, open the video, and press play. The sound of English in the background became part of his morning rhythm. No pressure, no extra effort, just a small shift in how he used time that was already there. After a few weeks, something began to change. Marco noticed that during meetings, he didn't have to search so hard for words. Phrases he had heard in those videos would suddenly pop into his mind. He began to respond faster, more naturally. His confidence grew not because he was memorizing vocabulary, but because his ears were adjusting. His brain was adapting. He was tuning in. The beautiful thing is that this tiny habit, just watching one short video while brushing his teeth, became a kind of ritual. It was personal, easy, and sustainable. He wasn't trying to force English into his schedule. He was blending it into something he already did every single day. That made all the difference. One morning, he texted me a message that said, "I had a call with a client in London today. I didn't panic. I just spoke. It felt natural." He said he was still nervous, but not frozen. He was able to follow the conversation and contribute without overthinking. That was the moment he realized this new routine was working. What I love about Marco's story is how real and simple it is. He didn't make a huge lifestyle change. He didn't need to wake up 2 hours earlier or spend his weekend studying. He took a moment that already existed and gave it a new purpose. That's the power of mini routines. Marco later added a second part to his routine. In the evening, during dinner prep, he started listening to a podcast in English while cutting vegetables. Again, nothing formal, just letting the language be present. That second habit came naturally because the first one already felt solid. He didn't add both at once. He let the first one become part of his life, and then the second followed. He once told me something I'll never forget. The problem wasn't that I didn't have time. It was that I thought I needed more time to make progress. But what I really needed was less pressure and more consistency. That's exactly it. I want you to think about your day. Where is your version of Marco's toothbrush moment? Maybe it's your coffee break. Maybe it's your walk to the subway. Maybe it's 5 quiet minutes before bed. Whatever it is, you don't need to change your life. You just need to add a few drops of English to what already exists. Marco's story reminds us that learning doesn't have to be dramatic. In fact, the most effective changes are often the smallest, the ones we can repeat without resistance, the ones that become part of who we are, not just something we try to do. So, when people say, "I don't have time," I think of Marco, a busy professional, full schedule, constant meetings, but still finding a way to grow his confidence and fluency through a tiny window of time each day. That's what's possible when you stop chasing the perfect study plan and start building real habits that match your real life. That small daily decision, pressing play while brushing his teeth, became the reason Marco now feels comfortable speaking English with people all over the world. It didn't take hours. It didn't take pressure. It took one moment, repeated with intention, until it became part of his voice. Let's take a moment to talk about something we often ignore when learning a language: the small wins. The tiny, quiet victories that don't always feel like progress, but actually matter more than we think. I've met so many learners who work hard, stay consistent, try their best, but still feel like they're not doing enough. Why? Because they measure their success only in big moments like being fluent in a conversation, passing an exam, or giving a perfect presentation. And while those big goals are great, they don't happen every day. What happens every day are the small wins. And if we don't learn to notice and celebrate them, we lose motivation before we even realize we're improving. Recognizing small progress is not about lowering your expectations. It's about seeing the full picture. Learning a language isn't one big step, it's thousands of tiny steps, many of which happen quietly in the background. The day you recognize a new word in a song, the moment you understand someone's question without needing subtitles, the time you answer with yes, I have instead of yes without even thinking, that's real growth. That's your brain doing the work. I remember a listener from Warsaw, Anita. She once told me she was feeling stuck. She had been listening to English podcasts every morning and journaling in the evenings, but she didn't feel like she was improving. I asked her to tell me about her week. She paused and said, "Well, I understood almost everything in that new episode I listened to yesterday." Then she added, "And I helped a tourist at the train station last weekend." I answered in English, which I usually avoid. I looked at her and said, "That's progress. That's more than you think." She hadn't counted those things as victories. She was waiting for something bigger, but the big things grow from small ones. When you learn to celebrate these moments, something shifts. You stop focusing on what you can't do and start noticing what you can do. And that mindset is what keeps you going when things get tough. Because let's be honest, language learning takes time. It's not linear. Some weeks you feel great, others you feel lost. But if you can look at each day and say, I did something, even something small, you create momentum. I often suggest keeping a small wins journal. Nothing fancy, just a place where you write one thing each day that shows your English is improving. It could be as simple as, "Today I remembered the word actually during a meeting," or "I listened to a full podcast without pausing," or "I asked a question in English at work." When you look back after a week or a month, you'll be amazed at what you've done. You'll see progress where you once saw nothing, and don't underestimate how powerful it is to say a single sentence out loud correctly, or to understand a joke in English, or to respond with a short phrase without translating in your head. Those are moments your brain is telling you, I'm adapting, I'm learning, I'm doing this. You don't need applause or certificates. You just need to notice, acknowledge, and keep going. I once had a listener from Stockholm, Daniel, who told me he celebrated every time he used an English expression naturally in conversation. One day he used the phrase, "I'll keep that in mind," during a business call, and he wrote it down in his notebook like it was a medal. And why not? It was a real win. He learned the phrase, remembered it, and used it in the right context. That's how fluency grows, not from memorizing hundreds of words at once, but from using one at the right time and feeling good about it. The problem is, we live in a world that celebrates results, not process. Social media shows us people speaking fluently, passing exams, giving speeches. We compare ourselves and think, why am I not there yet? But what we don't see is the hundreds of small wins behind that fluency, the private moments, the daily efforts, the times they forgot a word, corrected themselves, and tried again. That's what makes the difference. And that's what you're doing, even if it doesn't feel like it yet. So I encourage you, start looking for those moments. Did you speak out loud today? Did you listen to a new word and recognize its meaning? Did you reply in English instead of staying silent? Did you write a sentence in your journal? Did you repeat a phrase from a podcast and say, that sounded good? These are your wins, and every one of them deserves your attention. Sometimes we need to give ourselves permission to be proud of what we've done. You're not waiting for someone to tell you you've improved. You can tell yourself. You can say, I did that, and let that moment carry you forward. When you do this often enough, you begin to see yourself not just as a learner, but as a speaker, someone who is active in the language, even in small ways. You're not building fluency in one day. You're building it in tiny layers, day by day. And those layers grow stronger every time you recognize progress, however small it may seem. I know people who practiced for 10 minutes a day and learned to express themselves clearly in 6 months, not because they had perfect grammar, but because they built habits and celebrated the process. The learners who succeed are not the ones who never feel doubt. They're the ones who keep going despite it. And what keeps them going is noticing, writing down, and being proud of the little things. Because the little things are not little. They're the foundation. Even now, think about your week. Was there a time you understood a phrase without translating? Did you pronounce something better than last month? Did you feel more confident, even for 1 second? That's a win. And it matters. Write it down. Say it out loud. Share it with someone. Or just smile to yourself and say, I'm getting better. Language learning is not a straight road. It's a series of tiny lights that show you where to step next. Your job is to notice those lights, to trust that they're leading somewhere, even if the path isn't always clear. So the next time you remember a word you used to forget, or understand a message without subtitles, or just feel a little braver speaking up, stop and celebrate. Let that moment count. Let it remind you that you are growing, that you are becoming the English speaker you want to be, and that every step, no matter how small, is a step in the right direction. One of the most common questions I hear from English learners is this: what's the best routine to follow? And my honest answer is always the same: there's no perfect routine. There's only the routine that fits you, the one that fits your life, your habits, your energy, your personality. And when you discover that, even in a simple way, everything changes. English stops feeling like an obligation and starts becoming something natural, something that belongs in your day. Let me guide you through what I've seen work again and again with learners from all over the world. The first step isn't about finding time, it's about noticing the time you already have. Everyone thinks they need to add something new to their schedule, but I want you to look at what's already there. You're not starting from zero. You already have a daily rhythm. You already have patterns. All we need to do is gently insert English into the small pockets of that rhythm. Think about your morning. Maybe you drink coffee or tea. Maybe you shower or get dressed in silence. Maybe you scroll through your phone. All of these moments are opportunities. If you're drinking your coffee, could you listen to a short podcast? If you're in the shower, could you repeat a phrase to yourself? If you check your phone, could you read a quick quote or a sentence in English before anything else? These are not big changes. They're simple swaps. And those swaps can build a powerful habit. Let's move through the day. Do you walk to work or take public transportation? Those are golden moments. I had a listener in Barcelona, Miguel, who started listening to English dialogues during his 15-minute subway ride every morning. That one choice gave him 75 minutes of English exposure every week without taking any extra time from his day. He didn't pause, he didn't take notes. He just listened, and little by little, that routine changed the way he processed the language. That's the kind of quiet progress we're looking for. Now think about lunchtime. Some people eat alone or take a short break. That can be a great time to review something you heard earlier or write a sentence in English. Just one sentence. I often remind people, you don't need to do everything. You need to do something, and keep it light. If it's too heavy, you won't do it again. If it's simple and personal, you will. Evening routines are just as powerful. If you cook dinner, that could be your English listening time. If you clean up, fold laundry, or take a walk, those are all spaces where English can fit. You don't need silence. You don't need focus. You don't need to pause and repeat. Just let the language be part of the background. The more your ears hear English in a relaxed environment, the more familiar it becomes. And then there's bedtime. One of my favorite routines to suggest is ending the day with a reflection. You can write a short thought in a journal, something like, "Today I learned a new word," or "I spoke in English without planning to." Or, if you prefer, think of one sentence in English and repeat it softly before you sleep. This tells your brain, English is part of my day, from beginning to end. The secret to all of this is personalization. I can give you dozens of ideas, but the one that works is the one that feels easy for you. You don't have to follow someone else's method. You don't need a strict schedule or a complicated plan. What you need is to notice the moments that already exist in your life and choose one or two to connect with English. I remember a woman from Prague, Susanna. She had tried many online courses but couldn't stay consistent. When we talked, I asked her to describe her typical day. She said, "In the morning I walk my dog. At night, I read for 10 minutes. We didn't change her day. We simply added English into what she already did. She started listening to an English podcast while walking her dog and reading one page of a novel in English before bed. That became her routine, not because someone told her to do it, but because it worked for her life, and that's the key. If you build a routine that feels natural, you'll stick with it. If you try to copy something that doesn't match your energy or schedule, you'll drop it in a few days. So here's a good way to start. Choose one anchor in your day. Something you do every single day without fail. It could be brushing your teeth, making your bed, commuting, or your first cup of coffee. Then, choose one English activity that fits into that space. That's it. That's your starting point. When that becomes natural, you can add more if you want, but never all at once. You can also mix activities depending on your mood. Some days you might want to listen. Other days you might want to speak out loud or write, or even just repeat one phrase. That flexibility is part of what makes a routine sustainable. You don't need to do the same thing every day, you just need to show up for English in a way that feels honest, and I want you to hear this clearly. Even 5 minutes counts. People often think, if I can't do 30 minutes, it's not worth it. But 5 minutes every day is more powerful than 30 minutes once a week. It's about frequency, not perfection. It's about showing your brain that English is a regular visitor, not a stranger. You might already be doing more than you think. Do you follow an English page on social media? That's exposure. Do you speak one sentence to yourself while cooking? That's practice. Do you recognize a word in a movie? That's progress. All of these moments add up, and when you link them to your daily routine, they multiply. So today, take a moment to look at your own life. What are your non-negotiables? Your habits? Your daily anchors? Choose one, and ask yourself, how could English fit here? You don't need to wait for the perfect day. You don't need to wait until you feel ready. You can start where you are, with what you have, and build a routine that belongs to you. Not perfect, just consistent, just yours. Let me tell you about Samira, a university student living in Madrid. She's studying international relations, and as you can imagine, English plays a big role in her academic life. Most of her textbooks are in English. Many of her professors speak English during lectures, and several of her classmates come from different parts of Europe and beyond. For a long time, Samira felt stuck between understanding English and actually using it. She could read and write quite well, but when it came to speaking, she hesitated. Her thoughts were there, but they didn't come out smoothly. Samira reached out to me after listening to an episode where I talked about micro-routines. She said, "Julia, my schedule is completely full. I barely have time to breathe between classes, assignments, and part-time work. I want to practice speaking, but I don't know where to fit it in. So I asked her one simple question. What's one moment in your day when you're alone, even for just a few minutes? She thought about it and replied, lunchtime. I usually eat alone in the campus cafe. That was our opening. That quiet moment, that routine she already had, it was the perfect space for a daily English ritual. So I gave her a challenge. I said, every day during lunch, I want you to focus on just one sentence in English. That's it. One sentence. Read it, say it, repeat it. Make it your sentence of the day. At first, she kept it very simple. She wrote one phrase on a sticky note each morning, something she'd seen in a class, a show, or an article, and put it in her notebook or on her phone. During lunch, she would take out the note, read the phrase silently, then say it softly to herself. Nothing dramatic. No stress. Just a quiet personal practice. It became a moment of calm, a pause from her busy day that was just for her and the language. After a couple of weeks, something shifted. Samira started to feel more connected to the sentences. She wasn't just repeating them, she was thinking about them, playing with them, using them in her thoughts. One day, she told me, I realized I was starting to form new sentences based on the structure of the one I had practiced. That's when I suggested the next step, voice recording. Instead of just saying the sentence out loud during lunch, she began to record herself. Nothing fancy, just a quick voice memo on her phone. She would say the sentence a few times, then try using it in a question or in a short comment. She'd listen to herself and sometimes record a second version. It became a daily conversation with herself, a safe space to try, to listen, to grow. The amazing part is that this entire routine took less than 5 minutes, but the consistency made it powerful. By practicing one phrase a day, not only was she building vocabulary, she was also training her brain to feel comfortable forming sentences. Her pronunciation improved because she was hearing her own voice regularly. Her speaking rhythm became smoother, and perhaps most importantly, she began to trust her English. One of the things I loved most about Samira's approach was how she stayed flexible. Some days the phrase was formal, like something she heard in a lecture. Other days, it was something casual she'd heard in a movie. She wasn't following a textbook. She was following her curiosity. And because the routine was so manageable, she never felt overwhelmed. Even during exam season, she kept going. She told me, I might not have time for a full study session, but I always have time for one phrase. Over time, Samira's mini routine expanded in subtle but meaningful ways. She started writing down her daily phrase in a digital note. Sometimes she added a translation. Sometimes she wrote a variation of it. She began collecting her phrases like pieces of a puzzle, building a personal bank of expressions she could return to. And that bank became her foundation when speaking. She shared something with me that I still think about often. She said, it's not just about learning a phrase. It's about showing up for myself. Every time I take that little action, I feel proud. I feel like I'm building something. And she was. She was building fluency, not in big leaps, but in steady, quiet steps. A few months later, Samira had a group presentation in one of her international relations classes. It was in English, and she was nervous, but she felt ready. She used several of the phrases she had practiced during her lunchtime routine. And after the presentation, one of her professors complimented her on how natural her speaking sounded. She told me it felt like everything she had done privately, those sticky notes, those voice recordings, had prepared her for that moment. Samira's story is such a powerful reminder that you don't need perfect conditions to make progress. You don't need hours. You don't need a language partner. You don't even need a study plan. What you need is a consistent moment, a personal connection, and a decision to show up, even when it's just for one phrase a day. When learners say they don't have time, I think of Samira, sitting in a campus cafe, quietly repeating one sentence to herself over lunch. That small ritual became her practice. Her confidence didn't come from doing more. It came from doing something that matched her life, her energy, and her goals, and it's something you can do too. Choose a time that belongs to you, even if it's only 5 minutes. Choose a sentence that feels interesting or useful. Say it out loud. Record it if you want. Use it in your thoughts. And most importantly, let that small act remind you that fluency is built in the tiny, intentional spaces of your day. Samira didn't wait for the perfect time. She made the time she had count. That's the real secret to growing in English. Not pressure, not perfection, just presence. One phrase at a time, one day at a time. One of the most powerful, underrated tools you have to improve your English, especially your speaking and thinking in English, is something completely free, always available, and entirely in your control. It's called self-talk. Yes, I mean speaking to yourself in English, out loud, whispered, in your head, narrating your actions, asking and answering simple questions, or just repeating a phrase you like. It might feel strange at first, but I promise you, it works. And not only does it work, it's one of the most effective habits you can build no matter your level. I want to break this down and make it feel as normal and doable as it truly is. Think about how children learn their first language. They hear words, they repeat them, they experiment, they talk to themselves as they play. They're not afraid of making mistakes. They just use language freely. And that freedom is exactly what we need to recreate when we're learning a new language as adults. Self-talk gives you that space to try, to speak, and to hear your own voice in English without pressure or fear of judgment. I often tell people, if you want to become more comfortable speaking English, you need to speak more. And if you don't, have someone to talk to yourself. It's not a second best option. It's not a backup. It's a core practice. And it's available anytime, anywhere. Let me give you a few examples of what self-talk can look like. You wake up in the morning, and as you get ready, you say out loud, I'm brushing my teeth now. Or, I'm looking for my keys. Where did I put them? You go to the kitchen and say, time for coffee. I like strong coffee in the morning. These are small, everyday sentences. But when you say them in English, you're creating real speaking practice. Your brain connects language to action. That's how fluency builds. You can also describe what you see. Maybe you're walking down the street. In your mind or out loud if you're alone you say, the weather is nice today. That woman is wearing a red jacket. I see a bus coming. These observations don't need to be poetic. They don't need to be complicated. They just need to be said. You're training your brain to notice and express the world in English. For those of you who like structure, self-talk can also be planned. You can create mini dialogues. For example, you might say, Hi, how are you today? Then answer yourself, I'm fine, thanks. A little tired, but good. You're practicing both the question and the answer. Or you might imagine you're at a cafe. Can I have a coffee, please? Then you respond, sure. Would you like milk or sugar? This kind of role play is incredibly useful. It prepares you for real conversations and helps the words come faster when you need them. I once worked with a man named Elias from Athens who was very shy about speaking English. He understood a lot but avoided speaking at all costs. So I challenged him to a simple task. Talk to himself every day for 5 minutes. No grammar books, no recordings, no apps. Just 5 minutes of self-talk. At first, he only whispered. He said things like, I am opening the window, or I'm going to the store now. Then he started adding more. I need to buy vegetables. Maybe I'll cook something new tonight. Slowly, his sentences grew longer. His confidence grew with them. A few weeks later, He told me that he started responding in English automatically when reading signs or thinking through decisions. He said, "I talk to myself so much now that I've stopped translating in my head." That's the goal. That's what self-talk does. It turns English from a subject you study into a voice you use, and you don't need to sound perfect. That's not the point. The point is practice, movement, familiarity. Think of it like exercise. If you walk for 10 minutes a day, your body becomes stronger. If you speak English for a few minutes a day, your speaking becomes stronger. You're creating connections between your thoughts, your voice, and the language. Another listener from Paris, Clara, started using self-talk while cooking. She would say things like, "Now I'm cutting the onion. This smells nice. I need to add more salt." Eventually, she began to include more complex thoughts. "I think this recipe is too spicy. Next time I'll use less chili." That habit made her more comfortable expressing opinions, not just naming objects. And that's the beauty of it. You start with the basics and naturally, you expand. If you're just beginning your English journey, you might think, "I don't know what to say." But even the simplest words are enough. You can say, "This is my phone. I have a pen. I like music." Then you can add a little more. "I like quiet music in the evening. I listen to music when I study." The words will grow as you grow. And the more often you speak, the more easily they come. You can also use self-talk to review things you've learned. Let's say you learned a new expression. "It depends." You can create situations to practice it. "Do I want pizza or pasta? It depends on my mood." "Should I study tonight? It depends on how tired I feel." Now you're not just repeating vocabulary, you're applying it. That's where confidence comes from. Some people feel embarrassed at the idea of talking to themselves. But remember, this is your private space. No one's judging you. And honestly, it's one of the best ways to make speaking a normal part of your life. The more you do it, the less strange it feels. And soon, it becomes second nature. You can even create rituals. Every morning, say 3 sentences about your day. Every night, say 3 things you did. You're building a speaking habit that reflects your real experiences. That kind of practice sticks. It becomes part of your identity. I've seen this technique work for people of all levels, from complete beginners to advanced learners who want to sound more natural. It doesn't replace conversation with others, but it prepares you for those moments. It makes you faster, more confident, and more fluent. So when someone says, "I don't have anyone to practice with," I say, "You do. You have yourself. You are your first and most important conversation partner." And the more you speak to yourself in English, the more your English becomes a language you live, not just one you learn. You don't have to wait for the perfect time. You don't have to wait for someone else. You can begin today, right now, 1 sentence at a time, out loud, in your thoughts, whispered, sung, practiced again and again until English becomes part of your natural voice. And that voice, I promise you, is already there, just waiting to be used. One of the biggest obstacles I see many English learners face, and it might even be the most common reason people give up, is the perfection trap. It's that idea that you have to speak English perfectly. You want your grammar to be flawless, your pronunciation to sound like a native speaker, your vocabulary to be rich and impressive. And while those goals are admirable, chasing perfection often becomes a barrier, not a motivation. I want to talk to you honestly about why perfection is not the goal and why clarity is so much more important and achievable. Let me start by saying this: no one speaks perfectly, not even native speakers. We all make mistakes. Even people who grew up speaking English slip up sometimes, mispronounce words, forget the right tense, or choose the wrong phrase. The difference is that native speakers usually have enough confidence to keep talking despite those mistakes. They don't stop and apologize every time they say something imperfect. That's the mindset I want to help you develop confidence over perfection. I remember when I first started learning English, I was terrified of making mistakes. I would rehearse sentences in my head 100 times before speaking, hoping to get everything right. But guess what happened? The moment to speak came, and my brain froze. I got stuck trying to find the perfect way to say something, and sometimes I said nothing at all. It was frustrating, and honestly, it slowed my progress. It took time for me to realize that making mistakes was part of learning, not a failure. One thing I always tell my listeners is this: your goal should be clarity, not perfection. Clarity means your message is understood. It means you can communicate your ideas, feelings, or questions so that the other person gets what you mean, even if your grammar isn't perfect or your pronunciation isn't perfect. Clarity is powerful because it works in every conversation. Here are some examples of simple, clear phrases that work in almost any situation. You can say, "Can you help me?" instead of worrying about the perfect verb tense. Or, "I don't understand. Can you say again?" instead of struggling to phrase it more formally. If you want to express your opinion, "I think" is enough. You don't need to add complicated words to be understood. If you want to agree, a simple "yes, I agree" works. When you want to ask for information, "What is this?" or "How do you say this?" are perfectly fine. These phrases might seem basic, but they open doors to communication. They show that you're engaged, interested, and willing to participate. And that's exactly what others want. People appreciate when you try, even if your English isn't perfect. They value connection over correctness. I want to share a story about a listener from London named James. James was an advanced English learner but was extremely self-critical. He told me he was always stopping himself mid-sentence because he thought his accent wasn't good enough or his word choice wasn't perfect. After working together, James started focusing on communicating clearly rather than perfectly. He told me about a moment when he was in a business meeting and had to explain a project update. He simplified his language and didn't worry about fancy vocabulary. His message was clear, his colleagues understood, and the meeting went well. That moment gave him a huge boost of confidence. He said, "I realized people care more about what I say than how I say it." Another important point is that making mistakes is essential to learning. When you make a mistake, you create an opportunity to learn something new. You get feedback either from yourself when you notice the error, or from someone else who helps you. If you avoid speaking because you want to be perfect, you miss these valuable moments, and over time, that keeps you stuck. I encourage you to think of mistakes as stepping stones, not as walls. Each error brings you closer to fluency because it forces your brain to adjust and improve. It's a natural, even necessary, part of the process. I also want to remind you that fluency isn't about using fancy words or complicated grammar. It's about being able to express yourself comfortably and naturally. Imagine a conversation with a friend where you use simple words but get your point across easily. That's fluency. You want to be understood and to understand others. That's the real goal. If you catch yourself thinking, "I can't say that because it's wrong," pause and reframe it. Say, "I can say that, and if it's wrong, I'll learn from it." This small mental shift makes a huge difference. It frees you from fear and opens the door to more practice, more mistakes, and ultimately more progress. A great way to practice this is by using everyday phrases. For example, if you want to order food, you can say, "I want a sandwich," or "Can I have water, please?" There's no need to complicate it. When you're in a conversation, try to use short sentences first. "I like this." "I don't know." "Can you repeat?" These simple sentences are your tools. Master them, and you can build anything. Perfectionism often comes from comparing yourself to others. Maybe you hear native speakers or advanced learners and feel you're not good enough. But remember, everyone's English journey is unique. You're at your own stage, and your progress is your own. Comparing only creates pressure and self-doubt. Instead, focus on what you can do. Celebrate when you say a sentence, ask a question, or respond without hesitation. Each time you speak, you're training your brain, your mouth, and your confidence. I also want to remind you that communication is a two-way street. Sometimes listeners will ask you to repeat or explain. That's normal. Don't take it as failure. It's part of natural conversation. Everyone experiences it, even native speakers. Let me share one last tip. When you make a mistake, try to correct yourself gently. For example, if you say, "He go to the store," you can add, "Sorry, he goes to the store." This shows that you're aware and learning, and it builds your confidence in speaking. So, if you're holding back because you want to speak perfectly, I want you to give yourself permission to let go of that need. Focus on being clear, being understood, and being brave enough to speak. Clarity is your goal, confidence is your tool, and mistakes, they're your teachers. Remember, fluency isn't a destination, it's a journey, and on that journey, every word you speak, even if it's not perfect, brings you closer to where you want to be. So speak freely, speak clearly, speak with courage. You are doing better than you think. Let me tell you about Tomas, a software engineer from Warsaw. Tomas is exactly the kind of person who understands the importance of English in his career. He works with international teams, reads documentation in English every day, and often watches technical videos in English. But when it came to speaking, Tomas had a big challenge: fear of making mistakes. He was so worried about saying the wrong word or using incorrect grammar that he avoided speaking English altogether. He told me, "I feel like every time I speak, I might sound stupid or unprofessional." This fear kept him silent, and with silence, his confidence didn't grow. One day, Tomas decided to try a different approach. Instead of avoiding speaking, he started a simple habit: recording short voice messages to himself every day. Nothing complicated, just a quick audio clip where he talked about his day, his work, or even simple things like what he had for breakfast. At first, he felt awkward and self-conscious listening to his own voice. He noticed mistakes immediately, and sometimes felt frustrated. But he kept going. He said, "I reminded myself that no one else had to hear these recordings. It was just me practicing, making mistakes, and learning. The magic happened naturally." After a few weeks, Tomas noticed something surprising. The mistakes started to happen less often. His pronunciation improved, and his sentences became smoother. He also began to enjoy hearing his own progress. He shared with me, "Recording myself helped me stop being afraid. I realized that making mistakes wasn't the end of the world, it was part of learning. And when I accepted that, my English started to improve faster than I expected." What Tomas did is a perfect example of why practicing without fear is essential. Fear is one of the biggest barriers in language learning. It stops us before we even try. But when we create a safe space where mistakes are okay, like talking to yourself in private or recording your voice, suddenly learning becomes less intimidating. You give yourself permission to be imperfect. You give yourself permission to grow. I want you to imagine Tomas's journey. From avoiding speaking to talking to himself every day. From fear to confidence. That transformation didn't happen overnight. But it did happen because he took that small step consistently. He practiced not to be perfect but to be better. And that's what I want for you. If you're afraid of making mistakes, start small. Use your phone or computer to record short clips. Speak about simple topics. Don't worry about grammar or pronunciation at first. Just speak. Listen to yourself kindly. Notice what you did well. Notice what you want to improve. Keep recording regularly, even if it's just for a few minutes a day. I remember Tomas telling me that hearing his own voice, even with errors, was empowering. It showed him that he was capable of speaking English and that his English was improving. That confidence spilled over into his work meetings, where he started contributing more and feeling more comfortable interacting in English. He said, "The practice made my voice stronger. It made me braver." This story is a reminder that practice without fear is the secret to progress. Mistakes are not failures. They are signals that you are learning. When you stop fearing errors and start using them as lessons, you open the door to improvement. Tomas's story shows that speaking English is not about being perfect from the start, but about being willing to try, listen, and keep going. So if you ever feel stuck because of fear or self-doubt, remember Tomas. Remember that you can create your own safe space for practice. Start recording your voice, talk to yourself, and allow mistakes to happen. Those mistakes will shrink naturally over time, and your confidence will grow. You are more capable than you think. Your English is ready to improve every day you give it attention, even if that attention comes through small, imperfect steps. Just like Tomas, you can break free from the fear trap by simply practicing without fear. And when you do, you'll be surprised at how quickly your English grows. One of the most effective ways to build a lasting English routine is to connect your learning to activities you already do every day. I like to call this technique anchor activities. The idea is simple but powerful. Instead of trying to find extra time in your busy schedule, you link English practice to something you already do regularly. When English becomes part of your existing habits, it feels natural, and you're much more likely to stick with it. Let's explore why this works. Our brains love routines and patterns because they reduce effort. When we add a new habit to an existing routine, it becomes easier to remember and maintain. For example, brushing your teeth is automatic. You don't think much about it. You just do it. Now imagine if every time you brushed your teeth, you listened to a short English podcast or repeated a sentence out loud. The activity of brushing your teeth becomes the anchor that reminds you to include English. It becomes part of the same mental folder and easier to keep up. I've seen this strategy help so many learners. Take exercise, for example. Some people don't have extra time to study, but many of us do at least 20 or 30 minutes of physical activity during the week, whether it's walking, running, cycling, or working out at home. By playing English audio during exercise, you're turning that time into a valuable learning moment. The key is to choose something enjoyable so you want to keep doing it. Think about your evenings. Many people watch TV or stream series. What if you chose to watch shows in English during dinner? Not necessarily with subtitles, just listening and following the story. Over time, your brain will get used to English sounds, rhythms, and vocabulary without adding extra time to your day. That's the magic of anchor activities. English learning becomes part of something you already love or have to do. Waiting is another perfect opportunity. Waiting for the bus, the metro, or an appointment can feel like wasted time. But if you have a few minutes of English vocabulary review or listen to a quick dialogue, that waiting time turns into productive time. You don't have to carve out special study hours. You just bring English with you. One of my listeners, Elena from Helsinki, shared how she uses her commute as an anchor activity. She doesn't have time in the morning to study English, but she spends 25 minutes on the tram every day. Instead of scrolling through social media, she listens to English podcasts or audiobooks. She says this small change helped her vocabulary grow naturally, and it feels effortless because she doesn't have to find time for it. It's just part of her routine. Another listener, Jonas from Stockholm linked English practice to cooking. He loves cooking but wanted to add English without extra effort. So he started watching English recipe videos while preparing meals. Sometimes he repeats phrases out loud or reads ingredients in English. Cooking became his anchor, and English became a regular part of his day. You don't need to choose complicated activities or long sessions. The best anchor activities are simple, frequent, and easy to connect with English. It could be as small as listening to an English song while making coffee in the morning or reviewing flashcards while brushing your hair. What matters is the consistency and the connection to your existing life. Also, be creative. Think about your day and identify moments where English can naturally fit. For example, during breaks at work, while doing chores, or even while playing with pets. The more you anchor English to your current habits, the less it feels like a separate task and more like a seamless part of your life. One important tip is to keep these anchor activities enjoyable and manageable. If you force yourself to listen to long, difficult content while running, you might lose motivation. Choose content and activities that match your energy and mood. Some days you might want easy listening. Other days, something more challenging. Flexibility helps you stay consistent. Remember, the goal isn't to add pressure but to create natural English moments that fit your lifestyle. This way, you build language skills without extra stress. That's why anchor activities are such a smart strategy. They turn everyday life into a learning environment without feeling like a chore. So today, I want you to think about your daily habits and routines. What are your anchor activities? Which moments can you connect to English? It could be your morning coffee, your walk, your daily chores, or your commute. Choose one and start there. Add a small English habit to that moment. Let English become part of what you already do. When you make English a natural part of your day, it stops being an extra task and becomes a lifestyle. And that's how real progress happens, quietly, steadily, and with less effort than you imagined. You don't have to reinvent your day. Just add English to what's already there. That's your secret to consistency and growth. One of the most helpful habits you can create to improve your English is to make your learning environment visual. I call this strategy "make it visual," and it means surrounding yourself with reminders, prompts, and cues that bring English into your daily life without extra effort. Our brains respond incredibly well to visual input, and when you see English words and phrases often, your mind naturally absorbs them. This is a simple but powerful way to keep English alive in your day, especially when you're busy and don't have long study sessions. Let me explain why this works. When you have words or sentences in front of you, it's like you're gently reminding your brain to switch into English mode. Visual cues are anchors that help you remember vocabulary, phrases, and sentence structures. The more you see English in your environment, the more familiar it becomes, and the easier it is to recall when you speak or listen. It's like planting seeds of English throughout your space that grow quietly every day. One easy way to start is with post-it notes. You can write simple, useful phrases on small sticky notes and place them around your home or workspace. For example, you might write "Good morning," "How are you?" or "What time is it?" and stick them near your mirror, on your fridge, or beside your computer. Every time you see these notes, say the phrase out loud or think about when you might use it. This repeated exposure helps build your comfort and confidence. I had a listener named Sophia from Lisbon who used post-its all over her apartment. She told me that at first, she was skeptical. She thought it might feel childish or silly, but after a week, she realized she was recalling the phrases without even trying. She said, "It's like my brain started recognizing the phrases automatically. I didn't have to study them. They just became familiar." Sophia's experience shows how small, simple visual reminders can make a big difference. Another way to make your environment visual is by using images with English words or labels. For example, you can find pictures of common objects like a chair, a clock, or a cup and put labels on them with the English word. This works especially well if you're a beginner or if you're learning vocabulary related to your home or work. When you see a labeled object multiple times a day, the word sticks in your mind. You start associating the object with the English word naturally, without having to memorize it. If you like technology, you can use your phone or computer wallpapers as visual prompts. Imagine having a daily phrase or a word of the day as your phone background. Every time you unlock your phone, you get a little English practice. You could also use apps or widgets that show English words or expressions on your screen. These tools keep the language front and center in your life. I also recommend creating a list of expressions or vocabulary you want to learn and placing it somewhere you will see regularly, like on a wall or near your desk. You can update this list weekly or monthly with new words or phrases. The key is to keep it visible so you engage with it naturally throughout the day. You might glance at it while waiting for your coffee to brew or during a break. Over time, these words become part of your active vocabulary. Some people take this a step further and create a vision board or a dedicated English corner in their home. They fill it with posters, flashcards, notes, and inspirational quotes in English. This creates a mini immersion environment that motivates and inspires continuous learning. If you enjoy crafts or design, this can be a fun and creative way to make your English learning personal and enjoyable. One listener from Paris, Mark, shared how he made his kitchen wall into an English learning space. He printed out recipes in English and stuck them on the fridge. He also put up a list of common cooking verbs like chop, mix, and boil. Whenever he cooked, he read and repeated the words. This simple visual setup helped him improve both his vocabulary and his confidence speaking about everyday topics. I want to emphasize that making it visual isn't about overwhelming yourself with too many notes or distractions. It's about gentle reminders that fit into your life without stress. Start small. Pick a few phrases or words that feel useful and meaningful to you. Place them where you will see them naturally. Then add more as you feel ready. The idea is to keep your brain gently engaged with English throughout your day. Visual learning works hand in hand with other daily routines. When you see a phrase on a post-it note, you might practice saying it aloud during your morning coffee or repeat it in your head while waiting for the bus. You're creating connections between seeing, saying, and thinking in English. This multi-sensory approach strengthens your learning and helps you remember better. Another tip is to personalize your visual prompts. Use words or phrases that relate to your life, your interests, or your goals. If you love traveling, put up travel-related vocabulary or expressions. If you're into sports, create a list of sports terms. Personal relevance makes the language more engaging and easier to remember. I also suggest revisiting your visual prompts regularly. After a few weeks, some phrases will feel very familiar. Replace them with new ones to keep your learning fresh and challenging. This way, you create a dynamic, evolving environment that grows with you. Finally, making it visual helps you stay connected to English even when you're not actively studying. It's like keeping a quiet conversation going in the background of your life. That's why I recommend it so often. It's simple, effective, and fits into any lifestyle. So today, think about how you can make your English learning environment more visual. What phrases, words, or images would motivate and remind you to practice? Where can you place them so they catch your eye naturally? Start with 1 or 2 visual prompts and watch how your brain starts to recognize and absorb English. With less effort, visual cues are your silent teachers. They speak to your brain even when you're not focused on studying, and over time, they create a strong foundation for your fluency. You don't have to spend hours memorizing. Just surround yourself with English in small, meaningful ways. That's how progress happens quietly, consistently, and with less pressure than you expect. As we come to this part of our conversation, I want to gently invite you to think about tomorrow. Just one day ahead. I want you to choose one small, simple action you can take to bring English into your day. It doesn't have to be big or complicated. It could be just one phrase you say out loud, one sentence you write down, or one moment you spend listening to English. The idea is to take just one step, one action, one phrase, one step that feels doable and natural for you. I want you to ask yourself, where can English fit naturally into my day? Maybe it's during your morning coffee, while you wait for the bus, or while you brush your teeth. Maybe it's sending a quick message in English, or reading a sentence from a book, or repeating a phrase you like. It doesn't matter what you choose as long as it feels possible for you to do. Remember, this isn't about perfection or pressure. It's about connection and consistency. A small action every day adds up to real progress. When you decide on that one small step, you're creating a bridge between where you are now and where you want to be. You're making English a part of your life in a way that fits you. I encourage you to think about this tonight, before you sleep, or first thing in the morning. Make your decision simple and clear. And then, tomorrow, take that action with intention. Be kind to yourself as you practice. Celebrate that moment, no matter how small it is. Because every step counts on this journey. If you feel comfortable, I invite you to share your choice on social media or with a friend. When you share your goal, you create accountability and motivation. It also helps others who are learning English to see that progress is possible even with small actions. Your story can inspire someone else to take their own step, and don't worry if some days are easier than others. The important thing is to keep coming back, to keep trying, to keep practicing, one step at a time. You're not alone in this. We're all learning together, and that's the beautiful part. Finally, I want to remind you to come back to this space next week for more ideas, encouragement, and stories. We will keep growing together, finding new ways to make English a natural part of your daily life. For now, focus on that one small step you can take tomorrow. You have everything you need to start right now. One phrase, one moment, one action. Your journey is waiting. So, what will you try tomorrow?